Okay, so let's have a look at our planes of movement. Now, these are important to understand because they will help you understand the body and the movement, the mechanics of the yoga poses, and also really help you to be able to help your students because you can dissect the movement. So, starting off, we have sagittal plane, which is what we spend most of our time on, this plane of movement. So this is anything that goes forwards and back here. So if I was here, it will be anything that goes forwards and back. So for example, that might be walking, or running, or stepping up a ladder, or walking upstairs. The movement is forwards and back. So in terms of our joint movements, this might look like hip flexion. Hip flexion, I'm shortening the angle from my hip to my thigh. It might look like knee flexion. Even though it's going to the back, it's still on this plane of movement. It might look like hip extension. I'm taking the leg behind my body. It could look like flexion in the shoulders or elbows. Yeah, leg extended to the front, leg extended to the back. So anything that moves forwards and back on this plane is called the sagittal plane of movement. Then you also have the frontal plane. So this is anything that moves along the side here. So for example, star jumps move on the frontal plane, or if I lift my arm away from my body, this is abduction. And if I move my arms towards my body, this is add. I'm adding towards the midline, I'm adding towards the center, adduction, abduction, adduction. If I was to step out to the side, this would be on the frontal plane. If I extend my leg, I abduct my leg to the side, or I adduct, I add to my midline. These are all movements on the frontal plane. Or when we sit down, for example, at the very start and we do our lateral extension of the spine, this is also on the frontal plane. So we've had the sagittal, forwards and back motion, and then we've had frontal stepping out to the side or bending to the side. And then we have transverse, which is when we twist. So for example, if I was throwing a ball, if I was basketball, I'm twisting, or if I'm playing golf, I'm twisting, I'm rotating. So from a yoga point of view, this would be all of our spinal twists. Anything where we rotate the body, rotate the spine on this plane here. So just looking at those three basic planes, sagittal, front, back. We have the frontal that goes along this front plane here. And then we have transverse, which works on this plane here, moving across, rotation. So let's have a little look at, I'm recapping the movements of the joints. So as we spoke about briefly, so hip flexion, I am bringing the angle of the hip and the thigh to a shorter line, hip flexion. Here, knee flexion, again, I'm bending the angle of my knees, of my legs, I'm shortening that angle. Hip flexion, knee flexion, like in a chair. Yeah. Hip flexion, for example, at the beginning of our leg extensions. Or shoulder flexion, like preparing for our wheel on the floor. Shoulder flexion, or when we're in a down dog, the arms are flexed, they are over the head. Adduction is when we bring our limbs to the center line. Adduction, we're adding them to the center. Adduction, we're bringing them to the center. Adduct is where we lift them away. Yeah. So if I was on the floor, for example, I'm lifting it away from my center line. Abduction. I'm bringing it to my center line. Adduction. Adduction. Abduction. If I was to step my leg away, I abduct my leg and then move into a forward fold. Flexion of the spine. We have extension, like we're doing back bends, we're extending, and then we have flexion of the spine, where we draw the points of the spine closer together. Here, we're opening up, we're extending. So, if we were in our seated pose, doing this first gentle lift, we're extending the spine. Nice spinal extension. If the next part of that sequence, we reach up and we fold forwards, we are flexing the spine. So your little task is to have a look at 3 poses and consider what plane of movement you're on and what the joints are doing. So we will start with Balasana, child's pose. So very simple. So if you would like to do the pose yourself, just to feel it, and then consider all of the joints. So what's happening in the ankles, in your knees, in your hips, in your back, in your shoulders, and see how much movement you can articulate within that pose, the plane of movement and the joint, the movements of the joints. We will also have a look at warrior. So considering what is this angle of the joints, the ankle, the hips here, the shoulders, the arms, the spine. See how much you can dissect that pose, and then finally a dancer pose. So finding your own balance here in a dancer pose, looking at the ankle, the legs, the hips, so 2 hips doing different things, different sides, the back, the shoulder, the spine, the knee, and the ankle. And use the worksheets and see how much you can dissect and articulate all of the planes of movement and also the movement of the joints.